Hello viewers, welcome back to my channel. Here is Dr. Adnan Bukhari. Today we are going to discuss a very important and significant topic, that is the US-Israel war on Iran 2026. So this is a very important topic that has the far-reaching implications not only for Iran and the region but also for the global politics. The war basically started when the United States of America and Israel they started their military operations against Iran on 28th of February 2026, and the war is basically still ongoing today on the 16th of March 2026. This is basically the 17th day and the war is still continued. The United States term the operation, what they call it as the Operation Epic Fury, and Israel they call it as the Operation Roaring Lion. This was basically the operations that are basically aimed to dismantle and disrupt and destroy the Iranian nuclear, missile and drone facilities, to disarm the conventional capabilities of Iran, and also they were aimed to bring regime change in Iran as well. Importantly, on the first day of the strikes on 28th of February 2026, the US and Israel they were successful in killing their supreme leader Ali Khamenei, but this war is still ongoing with no end in sight. Iran is responding to the US and Israeli operation, what they call it as the counter-offensive operations, that is known as the Wada-e-Sadiq 4 or True Promise 4, through a drone strikes and missile strikes against Israel and the US bases in the Gulf, including their bases in Bahrain, UAE, Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Importantly, the war has the regional and global implications with air traffic disruptions, increasing oil prices and turmoil across the region. So the fundamental question that this war has brought us, and this video will try to understand, are that how the United States and Israel they are basically attacking Iran, and what are its key objectives under Operation Epic Fury and Operation Roaring Lion. The second question that this video will try to understand is that how is Iran responding through its Wada-e-Sadiq True Promise 4. The third question is that what is Iran's nuclear controversy that is considered the underlying cause of the conflict, and if the war is limited only to the nuclear controversy, that how much this war has cost so far for both the sides, and that does the death of Ali Khamenei mean regime change? Since power asymmetries exist between the two conflicting actors, the US and Israel on the one side and Iran on the other, evidence suggests that Iran is engaged in asymmetric and attrition warfare. So what are the concepts of these sort of warfare? Since Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz, it is important to understand the significance of the Strait of Hormuz, which is one of the key geopolitical and geostrategic choke points in the world. Likewise, the video will also try to understand about the strategic significance of Khark Island for the Iran, and last but not the least, how will this war end and who will be the winner. The US and Israeli operations they included both the kinetic and non-kinetic means. The kinetic means involved their missile strikes and the air strikes against different targets in Iran. Also, the non-kinetic means of warfare included cyber attacks and intelligence-based operations. In more than 2 weeks of the crisis, the US and the Israelis they have struck thousands of the places of Iran, including command centers, missile bases and air defenses. In the initial wave of the strikes in the first 100 hours, the US and Israel reportedly struck around 1,000 military targets, including the Iranian leadership that killed the 86-year-old Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, along with several senior officials including Ali Shamkhani, IRGC command centers, missile launch sites and military infrastructure. However, the US-Israel also attacked on civilian targets, including an attack on the Sharjah Tayyib school in Minab, southern Iran, that killed around 170 children. Importantly, the killing of the supreme leader itself was orchestrated and is the result of the years of the intelligence penetration and gathering, and the US used an AI port installed on the CCTV cameras around the compound of Ali Khamenei to track his location. Now the scholars say that it is not the humans but the computers that shape the contemporary wars. Outside its territory, an Iranian warship was also sunk by the US submarine in the Indian Ocean near the coast of Sri Lanka, in which at least 87 people were killed. So far, the war has resulted into the killing of more than 1450 people of Iran. There are 13 US servicemen that have basically killed in this particular war. The war has also cost the US around $16 billion so far. The fundamental question is that why the United States and Israel, they attacked Iran. Not only this time but also last year in 2025, the US and Israel, they basically also carried a 12-day war that was known as Operation Rising Lion and also Operation Midnight Hammer that were aimed to dismantle and destroy the Iranian nuclear facilities. So the US claimed at that time that they have obliterated and they dismantled the Iran's nuclear facilities, but still evidence suggests that maybe there are certain nuclear facilities that might be operating up till now. So if we look at the US and the Israelis' threat perception with regard to Iran, there is a larger perspective that needs to be understood. The US-Israel animosity with Iran dates back to 1979 when the Iranian Revolution basically came in Iran, and since then there was a animosity, hatred and threat perception that was basically was perceived in the United States and Israel. Since this war has started in 2026, there was a statement by Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister. He has basically claimed that it was basically his dream of 40 years that has come to attack Iran. Likewise, the Americans, they have been also planning for attacking Iran, not only for this year or last year, but they have been planning for attacking Iran since decades. The Iranian leadership, they have been consistently called for Israel's elimination and denounced the United States as its greatest enemy. So here we find that why the US and Israel, they basically perceive Iran as a threat. And this is for the same reason that they have been planning for decades to attack Iran. Iranian nuclear controversy was only a pretext. The US White House has basically chalked out several reasons and objectives for the Operation Epic Fury. The objectives were very clear: obliterate Iran's ballistic missile arsenal and production capacity, annihilate its navy, sever its support for the terrorist proxies, and ensure the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism will never acquire a nuclear weapon. There are different statements that were given by President Trump and their Secretary of War and also their Secretary of State that indicate different reasons why the US has carried out Operation Epic Fury. I have assessed all these statements, and I came to this particular conclusion that there are around 4 major objectives of the Operation Epic Fury and Operation Roaring Lion that the Israelis, they are basically carrying out. The first is the Iran's nuclear controversy. That is basically the underlying cause of the conflict between the US, Israel and Iran. Because the US and Israel, they believe that Iran was approaching the capability to build nuclear weapons, but Iran denies. Second is Iran's missile and drone capabilities are a threat to Israel, a long-standing US ally and the US bases in the Middle East, Iran possesses a large arsenal of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones. The third is Iran's regional proxy networks is also a concern for the US and Israel. Iran allegedly support groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Palestine, and Yemeni Houthis. These networks extend Iran's influence across the region. The fourth is Iran's regime itself. The US and Israel, they perceive Iran's leadership and government as their existential threat, and therefore regime change was one of the major rhetoric of the President Trump and Netanyahu. We will discuss about the Iranian nuclear controversy maybe in another video. I will discuss about the whole nuclear controversy that basically is the cause of the conflict between the US and Israel and Iran. Now, if we look at this Operation Epic Fury and Roaring Lion, these are basically a very ruthless use of force against Iran. And as I earlier noted that in the first 100 hours of the war, the US and Israel, they carried out attacks on the following locations of Iran. There are around 1,000 targets that were basically struck in many of the places in Iran. It was basically the US Central Command, CENTCOM, that commenced the Operation Epic Fury at the direction of the President of the US. Central Command forces are striking targets to dismantle the Iranian regime's security apparatus, and also targeting those locations which the US perceive are the imminent threat to the United States. So far, there are around more than 6,000 targets that have been struck by the US and Israel against Iran. There are many US assets that are employed that include the B-2 stealth bomber, Lucas drones, Patriot interceptor missiles, THAAD anti-ballistic missile defense system, F-18 fighter jets, F-16 fighter jets, F-22 fighter jets, A-10 attack jets, F-35 stealth fighters, and many of the early warning system, P-8 maritime patrol aircraft, MQ-9 Reaper, M142 high mobility artillery rocket system, refueling tanker aircrafts, C-17 Globemaster cargo aircraft, C-130 cargo aircraft, and many special capabilities that the White House has not listed in their website. There are different targets that the Operation Epic Fury has basically targeted, including the command and control structure of Iran, the IRGC Joint Headquarters, IRGC Aerospace Force Headquarters, Integrated Air Defense Systems, ballistic missile sites, Iranian Navy ships, Iranian Navy submarines, anti-ship missiles sites, military communication capabilities, ballistic missile and drone manufacturing weapons production facilities, and surface-to-air missile facilities, mine-laying ship factories and warehouses. So far, the US claimed that it has basically struck or damaged around more than 90 ships, that includes 60 ships and 30 mine layers as well. Their Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, has told the reporters that they have basically near completing the complete destruction of the Iran's defense industrial capacity. The US also claims that in the first 10 days of the war, they have struck around 15,000 targets across Iran. The US claim that both Iran's missile launch volume is down by 90% and one-way drone attacks are down by 95% since day one of the operation. However, we witness the other story in which the Iranians, they are still basically striking not only across the US bases in the Gulf, but also on the Israel. It is important that one day ago the United States it has basically attacked on the Kharg Island, that is basically roughly 20 miles off the Iran's northern Gulf coast. This is basically a very important oil export terminal for Iran that historically handled around 85 to 90% of its crude exports. But this Kharg Island proves to be a bargain between the US and Iran because Trump is basically threatening Iran to basically reconsider Iranian decision to open the Strait of Hormuz for the free and safe passage of the ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Importantly, how Iran is responding to the US and Israeli aggression. Iran is responding through its Operation True Promise 4 or Wada-e-Sadiq 4. Soon after Israel and the US initiated offensive action on Iran, Iran launched retaliation by targeting the US military facilities as well as energy and civilian infrastructure in the Gulf states that include Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, US allied Oman and Saudi Arabia, and Israel through a series of missile and drone strikes. As of 13th March, 13 of the US service members have been killed by the Iranian strikes. At least 18 people have been killed across the Gulf so far, most of them security personnel or the foreign workers. The Israeli military have also reported 2 of its soldiers had been killed as of 8th March. By March 15, Iran has launched the 51st wave of the missiles and the drone attacks, despite the US claim that they have crippled 95% of the Iran's missile capabilities. Importantly, after the death of the Ali Khamenei, the Iranian Assembly of Experts, they have appointed Ali Khamenei's son, Mujtaba Khamenei, to succeed him as the new supreme leader of Iran. So this is very historic because the death of the Ali Khamenei does not automatically mean the regime change, what the US and the Israelis they were anticipating. Iran has a system of the Assembly of Experts and the IRGC. These actors could maintain continuity even if the leadership changes. A new front in the war basically opened in Lebanon on 2nd March when the Iranian-backed group Hezbollah fired rockets at Israeli positions, saying it was seeking to avenge Khamenei's assassination. Israel launched attacks in response, hitting Beirut and parts of the southern Lebanon. As of 13th March, Lebanon's health ministry said that the attacks had killed around 773 people, including 103 children. This war has caused the displacement of around 700,000 people, including 200,000 children as well. Iran is leveraging its attack by retaliating against US bases in the Gulf and Israel through a series of the drone attacks and the missile attacks on the US bases in the Gulf and Israel. The Iranian response, relying on the drones and missile attacks across the Gulf and Israel, choking the Strait of Hormuz and cyber attacks, indicate that Iran is relying on the asymmetric warfare and attrition warfare strategy. While Iran cannot match the US or Israel in conventional military capabilities, it has spent decades preparing for the asymmetric warfare through building a series of the drones and the ballistic missiles that it has basically launching against both the US bases in the Gulf and Israel. Iran's response would not defeat a superior military force head-on, but would make operating in the Gulf painful and expensive. So given Iran's strategy of the asymmetric warfare in which one power is very powerful and the other is weaker in terms of the force capabilities, it is basically engaged into the attrition warfare, that is basically to prolong the conflict so as to incur more and more damages to the stronger party. it is doing this through its missile and the drone inventories. So here we just have a look on how Iran's missile capabilities and drone capabilities are basically changing the nature of the warfare, and making huge cost to the US and the Israel. Iran's missile force is central to how it fights and signals. Defense analysts describe it as the Middle Eastern's largest and most varied, spanning ballistic and cruise missiles, and designed to give Tehran reach even without a modern air force. Iranian officials cast the country's missile program as the backbone of the deterrence, in part because the Air Force relies on the aging aircraft. Western governments argue that Iran's missiles fuel regional instability and could support a future nuclear delivery role, a claim Tehran rejects. The longest range Iranian ballistic missile can travel between 2000 to 2500 kilometers, which means that these missiles can reach Israel, the US linked bases across the Gulf, and much of the wider region. So if we look at this particular graph, we find that there are different missiles of Iran that have different regions that include Shahab 1, Fatah 1, Rad 500, Shahab 2, Fatah 313, Quds 1, Ya Ali, Zulfgar, Qiyam 1, Qadr 380, Shahab 3, Imad, Khorshimar, Ghadar, Sijil, and Somar missiles that have varied ranges. The short range missiles that have the range of around 150 to 800 kilometer, there are different missiles that are Zulfiqar, Qiyam 1 and Shahab 1 and Shahab 2 missiles. Likewise, if we look at the medium range missiles that have a range of 1500 to 2000 kilometers, there are different systems that Iran has, including Shahab 3, Imad, Ghadar 1, the Khorshimar variants, and the Sijil that basically Iran has with a medium range that can hit the Israel as well. There are cruise missiles that Iran also possesses that include Somar, Ya Ali, Quds variant, Hofza, Pavi, and Raad. The Somar has a range of around 2500 kilometers. Over decades, once the United States and Israel, they were planning for attacking Iran, the Iranians, they were planning for the defensive operations through the development of these missile systems. Not only the Iranians, they were basically building the missiles, but also they were producing drones and autonomous weapon system that are inflicting an irrefutable damage to the US bases in the Gulf and Israel as well. Together, the missile capability and the drones that the Iranians are producing and they have produced, they are inflicting a irrefutable damage to the air defense systems of the US and Israel across the Gulf and Israel. The drones add another layer of pressure on the Israel and US. Slower than the missiles but cheaper and easier to launch in large numbers, one-way attack drones may be used in repeated waves to wear down air defenses and keep airports, ports, and energy sites on rolling alert for hours, not minutes. We have witnessed that the drones have constituted the primary tool of sustaining pressure across multiple GCC states in the first week of Iran's retaliation campaign. These drones, primarily Shahed series one-way attack drones deployed in large saturation waves, have been used less to inflict direct military damage and more to disrupt infrastructure while forcing defenders to expand costly interceptor against low-cost system. If we look at the Western reports, we find that the Iranians, it takes around $5,000 to $10,000 to make one Shahed drone, whereas it takes thousands and even millions of the dollars to basically intercept those drones that the Iranians produce. So this is basically how the Iranians, they are basically pressurizing the economic pressure on Israel and the Americans. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the UAE absorbed by far the largest volume of the attacks in the datasets that include 1422 detected drones and 246 missiles between March 1 and March 8, and total of 1668 total recorded strikes. The drones that are being produced by Iran are identified as Shahed 136, Shahed 107, Shahed 238 unmanned aircraft systems, and other reported drones that include Arash 2 and Hadid 110 Delahu drones. According to the CSIS website, the Shahed 136 drones has a range of 1000 miles and can reach speed of around 114 miles per hour and packs a load of around 66 to 123 pounds. The Iranian drones have been inflicting a huge damage across the US bases in the Gulf and also against Israel as well. Saudi Arabia has faced a threat environment which strikes focus on the energy infrastructure and military facilities, supporting the US operations as well. Drone and missile waves have targeted Riyadh, the Al Kharj region, eastern province, striking on the energy infrastructure and military facilities, supporting the US operations in Saudi Arabia, and repeated strikes on the Prince Sultan Air Base and the Ras Tanura refinery as well. Likewise, Bahrain and Kuwait have experienced some of the highest strikes volumes, reflecting both that their proximity to Iran and their importance to the US military posture in the region. Bahrain, that is host to the US 5th Fleet, intercepted large number of the drones and missiles during the first week, though parts of the naval headquarters were reportedly hit during the initial barrage. In Kuwait, the dense aerial activity has also exposed operational risks. For example, air defenses mistakenly shot down 3 US F-15 aircrafts after misidentifying them as the hostile targets. In Qatar, experienced repeated strikes targeted the Al Udeid air base and nearby civilian aviation infrastructure as well. The temporal factor is very important. Since the start of the operations retaliatory strikes, there were huge number of the drones that the Iranians were inflicting, and they were sending across the Gulf and Israel. But there is a decline into the number of the drones that the Iranians are hitting. For instance, once the campaign opened with a massive wave on March 1, there were around 1206 strikes that were followed by a sharp drop on March 2nd and a steadier rhythm for the rest of the week. From March 2nd to March 8, daily strikes stabilized between 190 and 392, suggesting a two-phase campaign, an initial shock wave to saturate defenses and signal escalation, followed by a more sustainable attritional phase designed to maintain pressure over time. Iran is not relying on the drones and the missiles. It is using the Strait of Hormuz as a strategic weapon against Israel, the Gulf, and the United States of America and its allies overall. The disruption of the Strait of Hormuz without a formal blockade is causing a great trouble for the United States of America and its allies across the region. Iran's deterrence playbook is not limited to the land targets, the Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, through which a significant share of the world's traded oil and gas passes through. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the significant waterway that passes around 20% of the world's oil supply that passes through it. It is one of the world's most important energy choke point, and the Iranians, they are basically stopping the flow of the oil through this passage. Iran's blocking of the Strait of Hormuz causes the global oil prices to spike and also disrupting the global trade, and it is also becoming the flashpoint for the naval confrontation. So if we look at the cost of the war that the Iranian has caused to the United States, it is estimated that the United States has spent around $16 billion so far in this more than 2 weeks of the war. Iranian retaliatory strikes caused nearly $4 billion in the US military losses within the first 2 weeks. Importantly, during the first 4 to 5 days, the Iranian counterattacks inflicted a damage of the US critical infrastructure worth $2 billion. For example, the chief driver of the cost was the US early warning radar system at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar that valued $1.1 billion, which was hit with a missile strike by Iran on February 28. Qatar confirmed that the radar was hit and damaged. Likewise, 3 F-15s were lost in the friendly fire incident by Kuwait air defenses on 1st March. During the opening attacks on 28th of February, Iran struck the US Navy 5th Fleet headquarters in Manama, Bahrain, destroying 2 satellite communications terminals and several large buildings as well. Iran also claimed to have destroyed the AN/TPY-2 radar component of the 3rd anti-ballistic missile system deployed at the Al Ruwais industrial city in the UAE. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Iran war cost estimate around $11.3 billion at day 6 and $16.5 billion at day 12 of the war as of March 13, 2026. In the first week of the counter-strikes, Iran targeted at least 7 US military sites across the Middle East since the US and Israel began striking Iran. That include the US 5th Fleet's headquarters in Bahrain, Camp Ari Fajan, likewise Ali Al Salim Air Base and Camp Buehring in Kuwait, Erbil Base in Iraq, UAE's Jebel Ali port, and US Navy's largest port of call in the Middle East, Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. In addition to the US naval bases that were targeted, the US diplomatic missions in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and UAE have also been targeted in these strikes. 2 drones, the Saudi Defense Ministry reported limited fire and minor material damage to the compound. According to the Washington Post, the CIA station inside the compound was also hit. Likewise, the US Air Force KC-135 refueling tanker were also crashed in the western Iraq on March 12, 2026, killing 4 crew members and wounding others. So this is basically a war that is basically still ongoing, that is unfolding, and there are different scenarios that how this war basically can lead to. And there are certain possible outcomes that this war basically can produce. For example, there can be a scenario for the surrender by the Iranian leadership that the Iranian president has basically ruled out this. After the killing of the Ali Khamenei, the Iranians, they have basically made his son Mujtaba Khamenei as their supreme leader, and still they are basically fighting. The second outcome can be the escalation of the conflict, the intensification of the conflict. For instance, President Trump has basically indicated that it might be thinking to send its boots on the Iranian land. The United States might be thinking to send its forces in Iran. But the Iranians, they have indicated that they are ready for it, and they are basically waiting for the US to basically come and fight with the Iranians. The third scenario can be that Trump abruptly call off the war due to the exhaustion and the public and the allied pressure. This is basically seem to be a plausible option because there are debates within the Republican Party, and many in America believe that it is basically not the US war, it is basically the Americans, they are fighting a war on behest of Israel. So this is not a war that the Americans has initiated. Americans have basically initiated this war on the behest of Israel, and there might be a possibility that one day Trump say that it is ending the war. Another scenario can be a negotiated ceasefire, but for that the Iranian President Pezeshkian has put three conditions to end the war. They have said that they will end the war once the United States it will give reparation to the war. Second, they will give guarantees that they will not attack Iran again. They are basically asking for the security guarantees for Iran. And third, they are also asking for the rightful rights of the Iranians under the international law. They might be indicating that Iranians have the right for the peaceful access to the nuclear technology. So given this particular scenario, it seems that the United States of America and Israel, they have basically started a war, but they don't know how to end it. They have opened a Pandora's box, but they don't know how to end it. There are different statements by President Trump, and he is basically claiming victory again and again. He is claiming that the United States has won and it is basically winning. The Iranians, they are basically requesting for the ceasefire, but he is not claiming. On the other hand, once it comes to sending of the US Navy into the Strait of Hormuz to open it, it is reluctant. They are not sending the troops, they are not sending their navy. What the Trump has said, it is basically on to those countries who basically have this oil exports. They want to have this free flow of the oil, so they should send their forces. They are basically asking France and Japan and China to send their troops to open the passage in the Strait of Hormuz, and the Americans, they will support them. So given this scenario, we find that the Iranians, they are engaged into the asymmetric warfare. Given the situation, they are basically a weaker party, but they are inflicting damage through a concerted and in a very costly war to the Americans and the Israelis. The air defense systems across the Gulf and Israel, they are fast depleting, and the Iranians, they are also engaged into the attrition warfare, a lengthy warfare. Given the ongoing war, it is important to understand that how the Russians and China, that are the two important global actors, how they are responding to. Once this war is ongoing, the United States of America is also leveraging this war to have engagement with the Russians. For instance, the Americans, they have allowed India to purchase oil from Russia. They have basically lifted their sanctions against India to purchase oil from Russia as well. Likewise, if we talk about China is basically looking at the situation, because China is basically a country that also imports a large quantity of oil from Iran, and the prolonged conflict is not favorable for China as well. China has said that it is basically looking at the situation that is very concerning for them. Likewise, In the UN Security Council, there was a resolution that were basically given by the GCC countries, and it was basically asked Iran basically not to escalate the conflict and have the ceasefire. But the Russian resolution that was basically aimed to the condemning the Israeli strikes and the American strike, that was vetoed. Another important aspect of this particular war is basically Pakistan's link with the Iran war. Looking at Pakistan's role into the Iran war, Pakistan is basically amongst those countries who has basically condemned the US-Israeli operation against Iran, and it was well appreciated by the Iranians as well. However, the Iranian war is challenging for Pakistan as well, as the war is unfolding in the Gulf, and there are certain strikes on Saudi Arabia. This is basically a situation where Pakistan needs to carefully navigate its relationship with Iran and Saudi Arabia, because last year in 2025 Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, they struck a mutual defense strategic partnership, and that indicated that an attack on one country will be considered an attack on the other, and there will be a collective response. Likewise, our Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has also visited Saudi Arabia, and he has pledged full solidarity and support for Saudi Arabia, focusing on the economic cooperation and diffusing the regional conflict. Escalation and intensification of the conflict is not feasible and not desirable for the sake of the regional peace and the global peace and stability. Israel and United States of America, they are striking Iran unabatedly, and likewise the Iranians, they are engaged into the asymmetric and attrition warfare, and no one knows how and when the war will end.